In this episode, we focus on a problem that causes real damage even when everyone has good intentions. Security teams and enterprise leaders often talk about risk using different languages, and important meaning gets lost in the translation. Security risk management is usually technical and detailed, filled with discussions about threats, vulnerabilities, controls, and incidents. Enterprise risk management, ERM, is broader, focused on mission outcomes, financial stability, legal exposure, reputation, strategic goals, and how different types of risk compete for limited resources. When these two worlds do not align, security risks can be minimized, misunderstood, or overblown, and the organization ends up making decisions that feel rational to one group but irresponsible to another. The goal here is to learn how to connect security risk to enterprise risk categories and decision processes without watering it down or turning it into vague slogans. Alignment means that security risk is evaluated, prioritized, and tracked in a way that fits how the organization governs risk overall. Without translation loss means that the technical reality, uncertainty, and control limitations remain visible, even as you express them in business terms. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start by grounding what alignment actually means, because it is not about making security sound less serious or more dramatic. Alignment means security risk management uses the same basic concepts the enterprise uses: objectives, risk appetite, risk tolerance, likelihood, impact, ownership, mitigation plans, and ongoing monitoring. It also means security risks are described so that they can be compared fairly with other risks, like supply chain disruption, staffing shortages, regulatory changes, and operational failures. Security risks often feel different because attackers are intentional and unpredictable, but from an enterprise view, they are still risks that can affect mission success. The enterprise wants to know which risks matter most, what the organization is doing about them, and what exposure remains after controls are applied. Security must therefore connect its work to the enterprise's decision rhythm, such as quarterly risk reviews, budgeting cycles, and leadership reporting. The key is to keep technical truth intact while making it legible to the people who allocate resources and accept risk. A major reason translation loss happens is that security teams often lead with technical details rather than enterprise outcomes. For example, a report might focus on the number of vulnerabilities or the presence of weak configurations, and while those details are real, leadership may not know what they mean for mission impact. Enterprise leaders do not typically think in terms of a specific vulnerability identifier. They think in terms of service outages, loss of sensitive data, fraud, safety incidents, loss of customer trust, and legal exposure. This does not mean you should hide technical detail. It means you should connect it to an outcome. A beginner-friendly approach is to treat technical issues as contributing factors and to describe the plausible business consequences if those factors are exploited or fail. When you consistently connect technical conditions to mission outcomes, you reduce confusion and improve the quality of risk decisions. Another source of translation loss is the mismatch between security's view of likelihood and the enterprise's view of likelihood. Security teams may say something is likely because it is technically easy to exploit, while enterprise leaders may think likely means it has happened before in a similar context or will happen within a predictable time window. Both interpretations can be valid, but if you do not define what you mean, the same word creates different impressions. A good alignment habit is to clarify whether likelihood reflects exposure and opportunity, historical frequency, adversary interest, or environmental change. You can also communicate likelihood as a range or as conditional, such as more likely during periods of heightened threat activity or after major system changes. This helps enterprise leaders understand that uncertainty is not ignorance. It is a known feature of the risk environment. Clear likelihood communication prevents the perception that security is either fear-driven or complacent. Impact translation is also tricky because security impacts are often described in technical terms like data compromise, privilege escalation, or integrity loss, while the enterprise wants impacts described in terms of mission and value. To align without losing meaning, you must link technical impacts to business impacts while keeping the chain of causality clear. For example, unauthorized data access could lead to regulatory reporting requirements, legal claims, customer churn, and operational disruption from containment actions. Integrity loss could lead to incorrect decisions, financial misstatements, or unsafe operations if the system influences physical processes. Availability loss could mean missed service-level commitments, delayed care delivery, or inability to support mission functions. When you present impact as a structured story rather than a dramatic claim, leaders can see why a technical issue matters. This is especially important for beginners to practice, because it builds the habit of thinking through consequences instead of treating security events as isolated technical problems. Alignment also requires mapping security risks to the enterprise's risk taxonomy, which is the set of categories the organization uses to group and manage risk. Many enterprises track categories like operational risk, compliance risk, financial risk, strategic risk, and reputational risk, and security risks often span multiple categories. For example, a breach might be operational because it disrupts services, compliance because it triggers reporting obligations, financial because it creates costs and losses, and reputational because it erodes trust. If security reports only in a security-only vocabulary, enterprise leaders may not know where to place the risk in their governance model. If security forces the risk into one category and ignores the others, leadership may underestimate the full exposure. A good approach is to map the same risk across categories while still maintaining a single owner and a clear mitigation plan. This allows the enterprise to see the risk's multidimensional nature without duplicating responsibility. Ownership is a cornerstone of enterprise risk management, and it is another place where translation loss can cause friction. In many organizations, security teams identify risks, but business and system owners make decisions about accepting or mitigating them because they own the mission outcomes. If security presents risk as something security alone must solve, you can create unrealistic expectations and resentment when business teams feel judged. If business teams treat security risk as purely a security problem, they may fail to allocate resources or change processes needed to reduce exposure. Alignment means clarifying that security provides expertise, tools, and guidance, but risk ownership usually belongs to the organization unit that benefits from the system and is harmed when it fails. For beginners, it helps to think of security as a partner in risk decisions, not the sole decision maker. Clear ownership improves accountability and makes it more likely that mitigation plans are actually executed. A practical alignment skill is turning security controls into enterprise-relevant mitigations with measurable progress. Enterprise leaders want to know what actions will reduce risk, how long those actions will take, how much they will cost, and how progress will be tracked. Security teams sometimes report control status in purely technical terms, which can be hard to interpret. Instead, you can express mitigations as risk-reducing actions tied to outcomes, such as reducing detection time, reducing exposed attack surface, improving recovery speed, or improving access governance. These outcomes can be measured and can be monitored over time, which aligns with ERM expectations for tracking residual risk. Importantly, you should be honest about limitations, because no control eliminates risk completely. When you communicate mitigations as steps that reduce likelihood or impact, you help leadership understand why investment is needed and what it buys. Security risk management also has a time dimension that must align with enterprise planning cycles, because the enterprise often makes decisions on quarterly or annual horizons. Security, however, deals with threats that can change daily, and that mismatch can create translation loss when leadership expects stability that security cannot guarantee. Alignment means establishing a cadence where security can signal meaningful changes in risk posture in a way that fits enterprise governance. For example, you might define triggers for escalation, such as discovery of active exploitation affecting your systems, major architectural changes, or a significant incident. You also define regular reporting that summarizes trends and key exposures without drowning leadership in noise. This balance keeps leadership informed without making them feel overwhelmed or manipulated. It also keeps security from being ignored because its messages are too frequent or too inconsistent. Another key element is aligning the concept of risk appetite and tolerance with security realities. Risk appetite is the level of risk the organization is willing to pursue or accept in pursuit of its goals, and tolerance is how much variation from that target is acceptable. In security, risk appetite often shows up as policy decisions like which systems require stronger authentication, how quickly critical patches must be applied, or how much downtime is acceptable. Translation loss occurs when risk appetite is stated vaguely, like we have low tolerance for breaches, because that does not guide daily decisions. Alignment requires turning appetite into concrete decision criteria that engineers can apply, such as requiring certain protections for sensitive data or requiring specific recovery objectives for mission-critical services. At the same time, you must communicate back to leadership what those criteria imply in cost and operational effort. When appetite becomes actionable, security and enterprise governance finally pull in the same direction. To avoid losing technical meaning, you should preserve uncertainty and assumptions explicitly, rather than smoothing them away to make a neat business story. Enterprise leaders can handle uncertainty when it is explained clearly, but they often react poorly when uncertainty appears unexpectedly later. So instead of saying a risk is handled, you can say the risk is reduced under certain conditions and remains higher under other conditions. You can explain what assumptions are being made about system configuration, user behavior, vendor support, or monitoring coverage. This is not overcomplicating. It is protecting decision quality by keeping the boundaries of knowledge visible. When you consistently communicate assumptions, you also create a feedback loop where the enterprise can invest in reducing uncertainty, such as improving asset inventories or improving telemetry. That is alignment without translation loss in practice. A final alignment skill is learning to communicate risk in a way that is consistent across different audiences without changing the meaning. The same risk can be described in a technical register for engineers and a mission register for executives, but the underlying claim should remain the same. That means you should be able to express the risk as a clear statement of exposure, consequence, and control limitations, then adapt the detail level without changing the message. If you simplify so much that the risk sounds like a generic worry, you lose the ability to act. If you stay so technical that leaders cannot compare the risk to others, you lose the ability to secure resources and decisions. The bridge is a narrative that connects technical causes to mission outcomes, supported by evidence and framed by clear assumptions. When you can do that, security risk becomes a normal part of enterprise governance rather than a separate world that leadership only visits after an incident. The takeaway is that aligning security risk management with ERM is not a communication trick. It is a governance discipline that ensures security risks are prioritized and handled with the same seriousness and structure as other enterprise risks. You align vocabularies by mapping technical issues to mission outcomes, aligning likelihood and impact definitions, clarifying ownership, and expressing mitigations as measurable risk reductions. You prevent translation loss by keeping assumptions, uncertainties, and control limitations explicit rather than hiding them to make the message smoother. When security and enterprise risk management are aligned, leaders can make informed choices about what to fix, what to fund, and what to accept, and engineers can implement controls that match those choices without constant reinterpretation. That is how an organization stays coherent under pressure, and it is how security becomes a deliberate part of achieving goals instead of an after-the-fact reaction to surprises.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.